Hey there, this is Joel from AZ Yu-Gi-Oh! Village, and I know the name might sound weird, at least my name in terms of to what the title refers to. I'm actually here to talk about wrestling, and the reason why I decided to talk about wrestling today is because I'm a big fan of wrestling, WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, and all that. And without complicating my life by making two accounts and keeping up with all the emails and distractions and all that, I decided to just say, hey, screw it, I'll now converge this. So if you're expecting a Yu-Gi-Oh! Video, I apologize, this is strictly wrestling. And I'm here to talk about pay-per-views and how I wish WWE would actually plan it out and distribute them without having 12 pay-per-views a year. So again, sorry. And if you look down my older videos, you'll notice that it's all predominantly Yu-Gi-Oh! In fact, it's all Yu-Gi-Oh! Related. But I'll have a lot of videos coming out in terms of just wrestling. In fact, I have a list here of things to talk about in terms of wrestling. And that would include this big week that we have coming up. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. That's where the Rumble is located. And that'll be this weekend when I'm filming it. And I'm here to talk about a couple things. And this week I'll be coming out with a couple videos. This week, today is pay-per-views. Coming up this week, predictions of the Rumble, live reactions, and then an aftermath of the Rumble. So be expecting those coming up soon, along with a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Related stuff. If you're here for Yu-Gi-Oh!, hey, stay tuned. I also have some videos coming out too that are coming out today. If you're here for wrestling, stick around. Hopefully this is pretty enjoyable, and it'll be a nice blend of change of mix for me as well. So I'm here to talk about lineups in terms of how WWE should have a lineup. If this video gets long, I'll try to convert it to two, but I try not to give a lot of facts out, a lot of statistics, a lot of ramblings. But if I do, I apologize, and maybe you guys like it, maybe you don't. So if you don't know, TNA has converted their pay-per-views into a way where it has the big four and 7 small pay-per-views in which they are strictly themed, like an X Division night, a wild tag team night, etc., etc. I don't have the full details on everything, and I think it's a really smart idea, even though they're pre-taped and spoilers can kind of ruin it. But I think it's still a neat idea. It lets people get really intrigued into things, especially because it would be like an exhibition night. That would be really good for fans like me and fans who like the exhibition style and have always been a big fan of it. And the fact that they allow superstars to come back, actually, TNA stars to come back. Petey Williams came back. I believe Shark Boy came back too. And hey, that's always fun. I've been a big Petey Williams fan. But I decided that WWE should do a similar notion to it. Now, other than the 4 big pay-per-views, Royal Rumble, Wrestlemania, Summerslam, and Survivor Series, out of the other 8, I feel the only one that's actually doing majorly consistent and can stick on par with them is Money in the Bank. And I think that's just because it has a nostalgic, and I see 2 points to it actually. There may be a nostalgic in which it's similar to how an older pay-per-view was in terms of King of the Ring, and that's where I compare both of them. King of the Ring allowed a multitude of people, both lower mid-card, and main eventers, to really shine in a big spot. And I feel like the Money in the Bank does that too, so that's probably a reason why people think it's a really good pay-per-view and it always gets consistent buy rates. The other one is because the Money in the Bank match itself is just a unique concept that everyone likes, and because it's gone from Wrestlemania, it's probably really big, really missed. So I decided to cut down the pay-per-views from 12 to 7, have them within a month and a half range within each other, because as I can probably tell, the storylines get weak, and it's just a really horrible thing in which you can't get really intact into a storyline because they don't have consistent build-up. They expect you to say, hey, this is good guy A, here's bad guy A. They're going to fight, they're going to rival, and because of it, we're supposed to be emotionally involved. It hasn't worked out really well. I think the last rivalry that I've actually held a bit of an interest to, and that's not to say that the WWE hasn't piqued my curiosity here and there in the last year, but in terms of actually making me invested, it was probably the CM Punk versus John Cena storyline in 2011 with the Money in the Bank and feuding off into SummerSlam. But I think they handled it really awkwardly after the Money in the Bank. But prior to that, it was really well done. So I decided to actually have 8 pay-per-views, but they're in a way that a lot of old school fans can appreciate and a lot of new school fans can appreciate. I said 7, I apologize, I'm in 8. I looked at the paper now. Obviously, the beginning of the year, January, is the Royal Rumble. It's the big kickoff. It's the road to WrestleMania. It's the obvious big one. And other than the Royal Rumble match, it does another thing that's really well and fully misunderstood and probably not well seen. Other than the Royal Rumble match, the main event between the World Heavyweight Championship and the WWE Championship features relatively good mid-sized stars versus maybe mid-carders Mark Henry in 2006 main evented the Royal Rumble against Kurt Angle for the World Heavyweight Championship. Jeff Hardy, before he became a World Championship, main evented in 2008. Was the warm up before the Rumble. And there's been other similar styles to that. Razor Ramon, before he became really big, 1993 against Bret Hart. Just these kind of things also help the pay-per-view because it enables mid-carders or lower main eventers to just, or higher mid-card, however you want to say it, enables them to really have a standout moment against a formidable champion while making the formidable champion strong against a young up-and-comer. So that's really good. Plus, after that, we all know that that the storylines can dwindle down and they get picked up for the WrestleMania, which is actually the next pay-per-view. Royal Rumble was set in January, and I had WrestleMania set late March, early April. That gives us about 2 months' time to get ready for WrestleMania. And the reason why I did this is for a couple of reasons. Reason number one, I felt that in the week or two following the Rumble, it'll be the overall conclusion to the championship rivalries, per se, a rematch, another chance, etc., etc. And I would think that would be an interesting way to have the Rumble winner kind of look in the background and say, hey, whoever wins at a U2 in his conclusion, I may be coming after you. And he could be to the same on the other championship and be like, hey, I'm always in the background. And once those feuds conclude, then you can have the winner pick his opponent. Then they head off into their feud. You can have the other championship get announced his opponent through some form. It's usually the runner-up of the Rumble. Not 2011, that was Santino. You can always have his opponent announced. They go off into the feud, and it enables a lot of other feuds to pick up. The reason why WrestleMania has been weak, in my opinion, is because they throw in these big clunker matches because they have no predominant feuds, and they feature relatively good-sized stars. So, after usual Elimination Chamber, they kind of just rush their way into WrestleMania. I'm not going to lie, Elimination Chamber has helped create some feuds, but they're really shortened, and it's a really awkward feud that tends to go nowhere and may kill the show, maybe not, but it doesn't really help. So I think that having a 2-month gap would enable a lot of feuds to get resolved after the Rumble, but also pick up and have an intense rivalry. And you're saying, well, how can we get invested if there's no big show? Well, you can have a big show. You can have a Saturday night main event. You can have a 4-hour Raw, 3-hour SmackDown, etc., etc., in which there's a big contract signing, little mini tournament, a battle royale, something that would start a feud, reignite a feud, or just something along those similar lines. It would be very beneficial. Now, WrestleMania is obviously the big pay-per-view of the year, and it's the overall, not the conclusion, but it's the middle grounds of all these rivalries. It's where the rivalries intensify, and it's where the rivalries reach their highest points. I'm not going to go into a lot about WrestleMania, but I think if the 2-month gap prior to that does a decent job of building up feuds and characters, you can have a lot more single matches, and hell, 2 tag team matches, and the crowd would react perfectly to it. Just like in the older style pay-per-views used to have it, especially in the Attitude Era. 1998 pay-per-view or 1998 WrestleMania was a well-conceived WrestleMania in my opinion, and it had a lot of single matches, not a lot of clunkers, but it was just a really good pay-per-view overall. Probably one of my favorite WrestleManias. The next one is Backlash, which is in May. I brought back Backlash because it's the overall conclusion to a feud. It's basically the rematch from WrestleMania in terms of every match, basically. You may have a match here or there that was just probably restarted or just made up after WrestleMania to allow certain stars to continue their character. But predominantly, the whole lineup of Backlash would just have rematches. And it would be in a way that's similar to how original Backlash would be, just an overall culmination. And I think that would do a really well job. Because after WrestleMania, you can say, hey, I didn't win because of this, or I think I could try one more time. Similar aspects to basically every match there. And you could also have a way where there's a one-on-one match between 2 mid-cards on the rise. That wasn't built up from WrestleMania, but was built up within the weeks building up to Backlash. And you can have like, hey, the winner of this match faces off against their respective feuds champion at the next pay-per-view, and that builds up another feud after Backlash. Now the next pay-per-view after that is Money in the Bank, and I made Money in the Bank June, end of June. I'm gonna sneeze. Sorry. My bad. Sorry. Money in the Bank is just because it's probably one of those things that's kind of in the midway of a lineup, and it enables a lot of superstars to be in one show with all of them giving their own specific unique styles into the match of Money in the Bank, perhaps, while starting off new feuds or doing that kind of midsummer thing where a lot of random feuds kind of get started and kind of evolve and are going without really hurting the flow of the year, because these are feuds that have been built with enough time that people actually do get invested with them. And while they might not be big feuds and strong feuds, they are feuds that people will watch because they have been given enough time. And Money in the Bank is just a nice pay-per-view to throw in random matches, or random feuds per se, that are actually beneficial. This video actually went a lot longer than I thought, and I covered the first 4 pay-per-views. If you click on here, you'll see part 2, and I'll talk about the final 4 pay-per-views and similar aspects to how I talked about the first 4. Thanks for watching.